The failure of appeasement, a strategic miscalculation. Our story begins in the winter of 1933, in Germany. On the fateful day of January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler would seize control of Germany and secure his rule as Chancellor of the new Nazi Empire. Over the course of the next 12 years, he would wreak havoc and destruction along anyone who dared to stand against him. In Hitler's rule as Chancellor, he would invade over 20 countries and kill over 10 million people. But how could the world just sit back and let it happen?
The road to appeasement begins not in the 30s, but in the trenches of the First World War, a war that shattered Europe and helped sow the seeds of the next. After the First World War, Germany was left in massive debt to the Allied powers and faced severe punishment under the Treaty of Versailles. Its military was drastically reduced, its economy was in ruins, and its influence on the world stage was nearly erased. These harsh conditions pushed Germany to a breaking point, creating the perfect environment for resentment, extremism, and eventually the willingness to start another world war. Meanwhile, the Allied powers were also struggling. Their economies were still recovering from the devastation of World War I, and they couldn't afford to be dragged into another major conflict so soon. This raises an important question. What motivated the Allies to adopt a policy of appeasement?
With the stage set, Europe was left vulnerable to a Nazi takeover. Instead of confronting Germany early on, the Allies made the devastating decision to pursue appeasement rather than stop Hitler's growing tyranny. But why did they choose appeasement over a stronger, more immediate response? There were three main reasons. First, after the devastation of World War I, the Allied nations were in financial ruin and struggling to meet their own basic needs. Second, their militaries were still recovering from heavy losses and were not yet prepared for another conflict. They needed more time to rearm. And third, in the early stages, the Allies underestimated Germany's threat and didn't believe that Europe was in serious danger. However, this would prove to be fatal. Hitler claimed he only wanted to restore German pride. So when he reintroduced conscription, built tanks and planes, and grew his army far beyond the limits set by the Treaty of Versailles, Britain and France chose to tolerate it. They called it reasonable. They called it defensive. They called it peacekeeping. But it was appeasement. In 1936, Hitler marched troops into the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone bordering France. It was a clear violation of the treaty. French generals begged to push them back, but France hesitated and Britain urged calm. No one wanted war over what seemed like a small piece of land. Hitler realized something important that day. He could break the rules and get away with it. Over the next 2 years, his ambitions grew. In 1938, he annexed Austria in the Anschluss, claiming Germans on both sides of the border belonged in one nation. No shots were fired, no one intervened. Another test passed. Then he turned to Czechoslovakia, demanding the Sudetenland, where ethnic Germans lived. This time, Czechoslovakia was ready to fight, but Britain and France weren't. In September 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler in Munich. Instead of defending Czechoslovakia, the Allies handed over the Sudetenland, without even consulting the Czechs. Chamberlain returned home holding a signed paper and famously declared, "I believe it is peace for our time." The crowd cheered, but it wasn't peace. It was appeasement at its peak, sacrificing a small nation in hopes of satisfying a dictator. 6 months later, Hitler invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia, proving it had never been about just the Sudetenland. He had lied, openly and completely. Now, even Chamberlain couldn't deny the truth. Britain and France finally drew a red line. If Hitler invaded Poland next, there would be war. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war 2 days later. Appeasement had failed. All the warnings, all the promises, all the negotiations, they only bought Hitler time. Time to grow stronger. Time to prepare for war. By trying to keep the peace, Britain and France allowed a far worse war to erupt. Appeasement didn't prevent the conflict, it enabled it. And in the end, it served as a painful lesson for the world. You cannot bargain with tyranny, you cannot reason with aggression. And peace bought through weakness is no peace at all.